The night was quiet on the alien world. The air was thin, cold, and filled with the soft sound of strange insects. A human traveler walked alone, his boots pressing against the dusty ground. He was far from home, far from Earth, and yet his heart carried the same warmth it always did. His name was never spoken in this story, because he was not here for glory. He was only here to explore. The ruins of old buildings stood around him. Their shapes were broken, twisted by time and storms. Tall towers leaned as if whispering secrets to the stars. Strange carvings glowed faintly on the walls, symbols of a language he could not read. He kept walking, his flashlight cutting through the darkness, searching for answers. But tonight he found something else. From the corner of his eye he noticed movement. Not the movement of shadows, not the flutter of alien birds. It was small, slow, and trembling. He stopped. His hand touched the small weapon at his belt, but he did not pull it out. Instead, he waited. Out from the darkness stepped a figure. It was not a warrior, not a monster. It was a girl, an alien child. She was thin, fragile, and her skin glowed faintly blue under the starlight. Her eyes were large, brighter than the moon above, and yet filled with fear. She wore torn cloth around her shoulders, but her feet were bare on the sharp, cold stones of the ruins. The human looked at her. She looked back at him. For a long moment, silence filled the ruins. The human traveler slowly bent down, placing his flashlight on the ground. He did not want to frighten her. He opened his hands, showing he had no weapon ready. His voice was calm, soft, though he knew she could not understand his words. "It's all right," he whispered. "I won't hurt you." The alien girl tilted her head. She did not move closer, but she did not run away either. Then the human noticed her feet again. They were cut and bleeding from the rough ground. Each step she had taken must have been painful. His chest grew heavy with pity. This was just a child, and she was suffering. Without thinking too much, he sat down on the stone ground. Slowly, he untied his boots. The laces came undone, and the shoes that had carried him across mountains and deserts on this strange world were now in his hands. He placed them on the ground and pushed them toward her. The girl's glowing eyes widened. Her small mouth opened slightly as if she wanted to say something but could not. She looked at the shoes, then at him, then back at the shoes again. The human nodded gently. He tapped the shoes, then pointed to her feet. "A simple message, these are for you." For a moment nothing happened. The girl did not move. The silence of the ruins grew deeper. The traveler began to wonder if she would refuse. Then slowly, carefully, the girl stepped forward. Her bare feet scraped against the ground. She winced, but she kept moving. She bent down, touching the shoes with her small fingers as if she was touching a sacred object. When she lifted them, her hands shook. She looked at him again, her eyes shining with something more than fear now. It was confusion. It was wonder. She slid her feet into the boots. They were too big, but they covered her wounds. For the first time, she stood without pain. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her breath uneven. And then something unexpected happened. The alien girl placed her hand on her chest, bowed her head, and whispered words in her own language. The human could not understand, but her voice carried emotion, gratitude, and something else. Something he did not recognize. The stars above flickered strangely. As if reacting to her words, the traveler felt a chill. This was no ordinary meeting. Something larger was happening, something he could not yet see. The girl turned her eyes to the sky, then back to him. She whispered again, her voice trembling, filled with meaning he could not understand. And then, she ran. Her small figure disappeared into the ruins, swallowed by the night. The human sat there, confused and silent. He looked at his sock-covered feet and laughed quietly. It was a strange thing to do, giving away his shoes on an alien world, but it felt right. Still, in the back of his mind, one question remained. Why did the stars flicker when she spoke? He looked up at the sky again. The stars above shimmered like eyes watching. The traveler could not know it yet. But this simple act, giving shoes to a barefoot child, would change not just his life, but the future of two civilizations. And somewhere in the darkness, unseen by him, more glowing eyes were watching. The night grew darker after the alien girl disappeared into the ruins. The human traveler sat in silence, his socks pressed against the cold stone. The air felt heavier now, as if the world itself was watching him. He did not move for a long while. He just stared at the stars. remembering how they had flickered when the girl whispered. Finally, he shook his head and returned to his small camp near the ruins. His camp was simple, a thin blanket, a pack of supplies, and a small fire burning weakly. He sat by the fire, warming his hands, trying to understand what had just happened. Was she real? He muttered to himself. His own voice sounded strange in the silence. Or did I imagine it? He looked down at his bare feet and smiled. No, she was real. His shoes were gone. The memory of her glowing eyes was too strong to be a dream. Still, questions twisted in his mind. Why was she alone? Why barefoot? Why did the stars react to her words? The fire cracked softly. The ruins stood silent. But then something changed. The traveler felt it first, not with his ears, but with his skin. A shift in the air. A faint vibration in the ground. He lifted his head and looked into the darkness beyond the firelight. His instincts told him he was no longer alone. Slowly, carefully, he reached for his flashlight. He raised it and the beam cut through the night. That was when he saw them. Dozens of glowing eyes stared back at him. Some high, some low, some moving. At first he thought they were reflections, tricks of the light. But then the shapes stepped forward just enough for him to see. Figures, many figures. They surrounded his camp, silent and still. His heart thumped in his chest. He kept the light steady, though his hand wanted to shake. They were aliens. Not like the child. These were taller, stronger. Their bodies hidden under cloaks of shadows. Their eyes glowed faintly, like hers, but sharper, colder. They stood in silence, watching him as if waiting. The traveler did not speak. Words would mean nothing here. Instead, he lowered the flashlight slowly, letting the beam rest on the ground. He raised his empty hands again, showing he carried no weapon. The glowing eyes did not move. Minutes passed. The silence pressed against his ears like weight. Finally, from the crowd, one small figure stepped forward. It was her. The alien girl. She wore his boots. They looked far too large for her feet, but she walked in them with pride, with purpose. She came closer until the firelight touched her face. Her eyes were softer now, no longer filled with fear. She pointed at the traveler's feet, his bare feet, and then at the sky above. The human frowned. He could not understand her words, but her meaning pressed against him like a puzzle. Bare feet, sky, shoes, stars. She spoke again in her language. The sound was soft but carried power. The others behind her shifted, whispering in voices that sounded like wind moving through broken glass. The traveler's chest tightened. Was she warning him? Or accusing him? He placed his hand on his chest, then pointed at her boots. I gave them to you, he said simply. So you don't hurt anymore. She tilted her head, studying him. Then she pointed to the horizon. The traveler followed her gesture, looking past the ruins. And that was when he heard it. A deep, rumbling sound. Low at first, then stronger, like thunder that did not end. The ground trembled beneath him. He stood up quickly, his eyes on the sky. Through the darkness, far above, massive shapes moved. Not stars, not meteors, ships, alien ships. Their outlines cut across the night, blotting out the stars. Engines hummed like a storm waiting to fall. The traveler's breath caught in his throat. The girl looked at him again, her glowing eyes reflecting the firelight. She spoke one more time, her voice almost breaking. Then she turned and ran back into the group. The figures around him did not attack. They did not even step closer. They simply melted back into the shadows, their glowing eyes blinking out one by one. Within moments, the ruins were empty again. Only the human traveler remained, standing by his fire, staring at the sky. The sound of the ships grew louder. He could see them now, massive vessels gliding above the ruins. They were not attacking, not firing. They were just there, watching, circling. He whispered to himself, "What have I stepped into?" The fire flickered, struggling against the wind. The ruins seemed to tremble with ancient energy. The traveler felt small, smaller than ever before, standing in the middle of a mystery he did not understand. But one thing was clear now. His act of kindness, the gift of shoes, was not small at all. It had started something much bigger than him, and the night was only beginning. The night sky was no longer quiet. The hum of engines rolled above the ruins, heavy and constant. Strange ships moved slowly, their lights sliding across the ground like searching eyes. The human traveler stood frozen, staring upward, his bare feet pressing against the cold stones. The alien girl had vanished again, swallowed by the darkness with her people. Yet her last action stayed in his mind, her finger pointing at his feet, then at the sky. He could not understand her words, but he felt their weight. It was not random. It was not simple. It was a warning. The traveler sat near the weak fire, but his eyes stayed on the sky. He watched the massive shapes above, their outlines sharp against the stars. They did not attack. They did not leave. They circled like predators waiting for the right moment. Sleep refused to come. Every sound in the ruins felt sharper. Every shadow seemed alive. The traveler clutched his pack and waited, hours passing like years. When dawn finally touched the horizon, he felt no relief. The pale sun rose, but the ships remained. Their shadows stretched long over the land, silent, powerful, and unshakable. Then he heard movement again. He turned quickly, hand brushing against his weapon, but stopped when he saw her. The alien girl walked toward him, her glowing eyes softer under the morning light. She still wore his boots, too big for her small feet. Dust clung to her clothes, but her steps were steady. Behind her, shapes appeared again, her people, dozens of them. Their glowing eyes followed her every step, waiting, watching. The girl came close, stopping only a few feet from the fire. She pointed again at his bare feet, then at the sky where the ships hung heavy. She spoke words he could not understand, her voice filled with urgency. The traveler frowned. He tried to make sense of it. Bare feet, sky, his shoes. The fleet, he shook his head. I don't understand. The girl stamped one boot on the ground. The sound echoed through the ruins. Then she pointed at the horizon where smoke-like trails from the ships drifted across the sky. Her glowing eyes locked on his. The traveler finally understood one thing. She was not only warning him, she was warning everyone. The ships were not here by chance. They were here because of her and somehow because of him. The girl moved closer. She placed her small hand on his chest over his heart. Her touch was cold, but her gaze was steady. She spoke again, slower this time, as if trying to make him understand. The traveler placed his hand over hers. I gave you shoes, he said softly. That's all. Nothing more. But deep down he knew it was not nothing. To her people it meant something greater. Behind her, the aliens murmured in their strange voices, watching the human, watching their princess. Yes, he was beginning to see it now. She was not just any child. She was important. Maybe a leader. Maybe something even greater. The traveler looked again at the fleet above. His stomach tightened. If she truly was important, then giving her his shoes was not just an act of kindness. It was a symbol, and symbols had power. Suddenly the ground shook. Dust fell from the broken towers of the ruins. The aliens around him hissed in alarm, their eyes glowing brighter. The traveler looked up and saw one of the massive ships breaking formation. It descended lower, engines roaring like thunder. The girl turned quickly, her boots scraping against the stones. She shouted in her language, her small voice carrying across the ruins like fire. The others responded, their voices rising in a chorus that sounded both fearful and strong. The human had no idea what they were saying. But he understood the feeling. Danger was coming. The ship hovered lower, its lights sweeping across the ruins. The traveler shielded his eyes from the glare. He could see the metal surface now, massive and ancient, etched with the same glowing carvings as the ruins around him. The girl gripped his hand suddenly. Her strength surprised him. She pulled, urging him to move. The traveler hesitated, but then he followed. Together they ran, the girl leading him through the broken stones deeper into the ruins. The other aliens moved with them, their glowing eyes darting in the shadows. Behind them, the ship's engines screamed. A beam of light cut across the ruins, scorching the ground where the fire had been. The traveler's heart pounded. His mind raced. What have I done? Why are they after me? The girl looked back at him as they ran. Her eyes burned with determination, and in that moment he understood something unspoken. She was not afraid. She knew this was bigger than him, bigger than her. The ships were not only searching, they were testing, watching, deciding, and somehow his simple act of kindness had tipped the balance. They reached a hidden chamber beneath the ruins. The girl pulled him inside. The space was dark, but carvings glowed faintly on the walls like stars trapped in stone. The girl finally released his hand. She looked at him and spoke one word, clear and strong, though he could not understand. Then she pointed at the sky one last time. The traveler swallowed hard. He did not need translation now. He understood the truth. The fleet above was not here for war. They were here for him. The ruins trembled as the alien ship descended lower. The walls shook, dust spilling from cracks that had been silent for centuries. The human traveler stood in the hidden chamber, his chest rising and falling fast. He could feel the weight of the fleet above, pressing down like the hand of a giant. The alien girl stood before him, glowing eyes fixed on the carvings that lit the chamber walls. Her small hand brushed against the stone symbols and they pulsed brighter, like they recognized her touch. The other aliens knelt around the chamber, bowing their heads. Their silence was not fear, it was respect. The human swallowed hard. Why are they bowing? Why to her? Then he noticed something else. Some of their glowing eyes turned to him, and one by one they too lowered their heads. His throat tightened. No, not me. I didn't do anything, but deep inside he knew that wasn't true. He had done something. A small, simple act, but one that carried meaning these beings saw as greater than he could understand. The girl turned to face him. She raised one booted foot and tapped it gently on the stone floor. His boots, his gift. A faint smile touched her lips, the first he had seen. And then the world shook again. A blinding beam of light poured into the chamber, as part of the ceiling cracked open. The alien ship hovered above, its engines roaring like thunder in the bones of the ruins. Dust rained down and the chamber filled with a deafening hum. The girl stepped forward, raising her arms toward the light. Her voice rang out, strong and commanding, though she was only a child. The other aliens joined in, their voices weaving together like an ancient song. The sound vibrated through the traveler's chest. The ship's beam widened, covering the entire chamber. The light pressed against the walls and the glowing carvings flared to life. Symbols blazed like fire and the air grew thick with energy. The traveler stumbled back, shielding his eyes. He had never felt so small, so powerless, yet so central to everything. The girl turned and looked at him through the glow. Her expression was not fear, it was determination. Then from the light, figures descended. They were taller than the other aliens, their bodies clad in shining armor that glowed like molten silver. Their eyes burned brighter, sharper. These were not villagers or wanderers. They were warriors. They landed softly, surrounding the girl and the human traveler. Their movements were perfect, precise, like shadows of a single will. For a moment, the human feared this was the end, that they would strike him down, but they did not. Instead, they knelt. Every armored figure bent one knee, bowing their heads before the girl. Their weapons rested on the ground, their glowing eyes dimmed in respect. The human's heart skipped. He looked at the child standing proudly in his boots. He finally understood. She was not just important. She was royalty. A princess. The girl spoke again, her voice calm and commanding. The warriors listened in silence, then slowly turned their glowing eyes toward him. The human froze. Dozens of warriors staring at him, waiting. The girl pointed at him at his bare feet. She spoke a single word. The ruins echoed with it. The warriors bowed. They bent their armored heads toward him, the sound of metal scraping stone filling the chamber. A fleet of warriors, soldiers of a great civilization, bowing not to their princess but to the human who had given her shoes. The traveler felt his knees weaken. He stumbled back, shaking his head. No, I don't deserve this. But the girl stepped closer, placing her hand on his arm. Her glowing eyes met his. She spoke softly now, almost kind, though he could not understand her words. It did not matter. The meaning was clear. His act of kindness had become a symbol. To them, he was not just a traveler. He was something greater. The chamber shook again, but this time it was not from destruction. The entire fleet above was moving in unison. The sound of their engines grew into a chorus, a rhythm that seemed to match the voices of the aliens below. The traveler stepped to the opening, looking up at the sky. Ship after ship aligned above the ruins, forming a pattern like a crown of light around the sun. And then, as one, they tilted forward. They bowed. The entire fleet of alien ships, larger than cities, bent in respect toward the ruins, toward the princess, and toward him. The human's breath caught. His heart pounded. He had never felt so unworthy, yet never so changed. He looked back at the girl. She stood tall in his boots, a faint smile on her lips. And for the first time, he realized something terrifying. This was not the end. This was only the beginning. The ruins were silent again, but it was not the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of awe. The armored warriors still knelt on the stone floor, their heads bowed. Above them, the fleet of alien ships hovered in the morning sky, their formation shining like a crown of light. The human traveler stood at the edge of the chamber, his bare feet pressed into the cold stone. His chest rose and fell quickly. He could not believe what he had seen. A whole fleet bowing, not to war, not to fear, but to him. The alien girl stood nearby, her glowing eyes fixed on him. She still wore his boots, far too large for her small frame. Yet she stood tall, her shoulders straight, her gaze proud. The warriors rose slowly, moving with the grace of a single body. Their leader stepped forward. His armor gleamed brighter than the rest, etched with ancient symbols. He removed his helmet, revealing a face sharper, older, more scarred. His eyes glowed with the same light as the girl's, but colder. He looked at the human traveler with great intensity. Then he spoke. His voice was deep, heavy like stone grinding against stone. The traveler could not understand the words, but he felt the weight of them. The girl stepped closer, raising her hand. She spoke too, her voice higher, but no less commanding. She pointed at the human, then at her boots. Her words echoed across the chamber, and the warriors bowed their heads once again. The human frowned. He turned his eyes between the girl and the leader, struggling to understand. His mind raced, connecting the pieces. She is not just a child. She is not just anyone. She is their leader, no, their heir. The truth struck him like lightning. She was royalty, princess, maybe even something greater. Lost, abandoned, or hidden in the ruins. And when he gave her his shoes, it was not only an act of kindness. It was a gift of dignity, a symbol of return. The girl stepped close to him now, so close that he could see the faint glow of her veins beneath her skin. She touched his hand gently, then placed it against her chest. Her heart beat fast under his palm. She spoke a single word, slow and clear. Path. The traveler froze. She had spoken in his language, or at least in a word he could understand. His eyes widened. Path? She nodded. She touched the boots again. Path. Her meaning struck him like thunder. To her people, his gift was not just protection for her feet. It was a symbol of the path forward. A path home. A path to power. The leader of the warriors stepped forward now. He placed one armored hand on his chest, then bowed low before the girl. His glowing eyes turned to the human. For the first time, the human saw respect there. Not just fear or awe, true respect. The girl spoke again, faster this time, her words weaving like fire in the air. The leader listened, then gave a single nod. He raised his hand, and the warriors echoed the gesture in unison. The traveler felt the ground tremble again, but not from the ships this time. From the people. Their voices rose together in a chant that filled the ruins, ancient and powerful. It was not a war cry. It was a promise. The human stepped back, his throat tight. He shook his head. I don't understand all this. I didn't mean for this to happen. But deep inside, he knew he had changed something. His small act of kindness had touched a thread in the fabric of their world. And now the whole pattern was shifting. The girl looked at him, her eyes softer now. She raised her hand and touched his chest again. Kindness, she whispered in broken words. Then she pointed at the sky where the fleet still hovered. The traveler followed her gaze. The fleet was no longer circling like predators. They were still waiting, ready. His stomach twisted. He finally understood the truth. The aliens did not just see him as a stranger. They saw him as something more, perhaps chosen, perhaps destined. His gift had become their sign, their prophecy fulfilled. He was no longer just a traveler on a distant world. He had become part of their story, and their story was about to change the galaxy. The girl's hand slipped into his. Small, fragile, but filled with strength, she pulled him toward the light of the opening. When he stepped outside, the sight nearly stole his breath. The entire alien fleet hung across the sky like a second dawn. Thousands of glowing eyes stared from the ground, warriors kneeling in perfect silence. The girl raised her voice. Her words rang clear, carried by the wind. The fleet answered with a deep hum, engines roaring in unity. The sound shook the very air. The traveler's heart pounded. He could feel history shifting around him, the weight of it pressing down on his shoulders, all of this. Because he had given shoes to a barefoot girl. The sky thundered with the sound of the alien fleet. The ruins glowed under their shadows, and the people bowed in silence. The human traveler stood in the center of it all, his bare feet cold against the stone, his mind spinning. He had never asked for this. He had only given his shoes to a child, yet now he stood before a civilization that looked at him as if he were something more, something greater. The armored leader stepped forward again. His presence filled the air like a storm. The other warriors parted, giving him space. His glowing eyes locked on the human. He spoke in his deep voice, words heavy with authority. The traveler shook his head. "I don't understand you." The alien girl stepped between them. She lifted her chin, her glowing eyes burning with strength far beyond her age. She spoke, her words sharp and clear, as if commanding the leader himself. She pointed at the human's bare feet, then at his heart. The leader frowned. He looked at her boots, still far too large, yet carrying a meaning he could not deny. Then he looked back at the human, studying him with suspicion and wonder. The girl turned to the human and tried again in broken words. "They ask?" "Why?" The traveler blinked. "Why?" She nodded. Her glowing eyes softened. "Why give?" The question struck him harder than thunder. Why had he given her his shoes? He thought about it. He thought about her bare feet bleeding on the stones. He thought about her fear, her fragility, and the way she had looked at him, half afraid, half hopeful. He answered the only way he could. "Because she needed them," he said quietly. "That's all." The girl translated his words, her voice echoing through the chamber. The warriors murmured, their glowing eyes flickering like fire. The leader's face hardened, but his gaze wavered. The traveler raised his voice, stronger now. "I didn't want anything in return. No crown, no army, no bowing fleets. I just saw someone in pain, and I helped." The girl's lips trembled as she repeated his words. The silence that followed was heavy, like the pause before a storm. Then the leader stepped closer. He towered over the human, his armor gleaming like fire under the light. He raised one hand, and for a terrifying moment the traveler thought he meant to strike him. Instead, the leader placed his hand on his own chest. His head bowed. The warriors followed. One by one, they placed their hands on their chests and bowed deeply. The ruins shook with the sound of metal against stone. Above, the fleet responded. The roar of engines rose into the sky, a thunderous harmony. Ships tilted in unison, lowering their massive bodies in a gesture older than war. "A bow!" The human's heart pounded. His throat tightened. He had never felt so small, yet never so heavy with meaning. The girl stepped beside him, her small hand slipping into his. She looked up at him, her voice soft but steady. "They believe," she whispered. The traveler swallowed. "Believe what?" "That kindness is strength." Her words cut deep. Simple. Honest. True. The fleet above trembled with light, as if the ships themselves were alive, responding to the moment. The ruins glowed brighter, carvings pulsing with ancient energy. The chant of the warriors filled the air again, rising like a tide. The human's knees felt weak. He sat down on the stone, burying his face in his hands. "I'm just a man," he whispered. "I never asked for this." The girl knelt beside him. Her small hand touched his shoulder. "Sometimes, the ones who do not ask are chosen." Her words sent a chill through him. The leader approached once more. This time his eyes were softer. He spoke in his deep voice, and the girl translated slowly, carefully. "They say, your choice is our path. They ask, will you guide or will you leave?" The traveler froze. The weight of her words pressed on him like stone. Guide or leave. His mind spun. He thought of Earth, of home, of his lonely travels through the stars. He thought of this girl, barefoot and afraid, who now stood tall because of him. He thought of the fleet bowing, the warriors chanting, the leader waiting. What was he supposed to say? The girl looked at him with wide, glowing eyes. "You decide." The ruins fell silent. The fleet above held still. Thousands of eyes, both alien and human, waited for his answer. The human lifted his head. His voice shook, but his words were clear. "I didn't come here to rule. I didn't come here to lead. But if kindness is your strength, then maybe it's the only path worth walking," the girl translated. The leader's eyes widened. The warriors roared in approval, their voices like thunder. The fleet above shifted, engines blazing brighter, echoing the choice. The traveler's decision had been made. But deep in his heart, he knew this was not an ending. It was a beginning. The ruins no longer felt broken. They glowed with light, alive again, as if awakened from a long sleep. The alien fleet hovered above like guardians of the sky, their engines humming in deep unison. Warriors knelt in silence, and the air was thick with reverence. The human traveler stood in the middle of it all, his bare feet pressed against the cold stone. He felt the weight of thousands of eyes upon him, eyes filled not with fear or hate but with respect. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady. He had made his choice. He would not leave them to despair. He would not turn his back. If they saw strength and kindness, then he would walk that path with them. The alien girl still held his hand. She stood proud in his oversized boots, her glowing eyes burning with hope. She was no longer the trembling child he had found in the ruins. She was their princess restored, their future reborn. And yet when she looked at him, her eyes softened, as if reminding him that she was still just a child who had once needed help. The armored leader approached again, slower this time. He bowed his head, his scarred face solemn. Then in broken words of human tongue he spoke. "You gave her path. We give you ours." The traveler's breath caught. The leader raised his hand, and the warriors echoed the gesture. Above, the fleet shifted in unison, forming a vast circle across the sky. From their formation, beams of light streamed downward, connecting to the ruins, connecting to the traveler. The carvings on the ground blazed with fire. The entire city seemed alive. The traveler stumbled back, overwhelmed. "What is this?" The girl squeezed his hand. "Legacy." The word struck him deep. Legacy. The light pulsed and visions filled his mind. He saw their history, wars fought, kingdoms lost, the child princess hidden away to protect her from enemies. He saw their desperation, their search for a sign that hope still lived, and then he saw himself, kneeling in the ruins, giving his shoes to a barefoot girl. To them it was not chance. It was destiny. The vision faded, but the truth remained. His small act had become the seed of change. The fleet no longer carried the weight of conquest. They carried a new purpose. The girl turned to the crowd and raised her voice. She spoke with strength beyond her years, her words flowing like fire. The people roared in answer, their voices shaking the ruins. The traveler could not understand the language, but he understood the meaning. She was telling them that kindness was not weakness, that compassion was strength, and that their future would be built on it. He looked at her and felt something stir inside him. Pride, not for himself, but for her. She would grow into a leader far greater than he could ever be, and all he had done was give her shoes. The leader of the warriors knelt again, pressing his armored hand to the ground. One by one, the others followed. The fleet above tilted low, a bow that stretched across the sky. The traveler swallowed hard, his throat tight. He did not feel like a hero. He did not feel like a leader. He felt like a man who had been given too much for doing too little, yet he knew one truth. Sometimes the smallest kindness could shake the stars. The girl turned back to him, her glowing eyes shining with tears. She whispered in her broken human words, "You changed everything." The traveler smiled faintly. "No, you changed everything." "I just helped." She tilted her head, confused for a moment, then smiled too. It was a smile of hope, of promise, of a future unwritten. The fleet roared once more, their engines like thunder across the sky. The ruins shook with life. The people chanted his name now, though he never gave it. They did not need it. To them, he was not a name. He was a symbol. And as he stood there, bare feet against the stone, the human traveler realized something. He did not need to be more than he was. He did not need crowns or titles. His legacy was not power. It was kindness. And kindness to these people had become a force greater than war. The morning sun rose higher, painting the ruins in gold. The girl stood tall beside him, her boots tapping proudly against the stone. Her people lifted their voices in song, and the fleet above bowed one last time. The traveler closed his eyes, breathing in the sound, the light, the truth. All he had given was his shoes. But what he had received was something no human had ever known before, the loyalty of a civilization. And perhaps, the beginning of peace among the stars.